Thank you for downloading this in-ear entertainment podcast. You're listening to Shakespeare's Sonnets. Sonnet 35. No more be grieving at that which thou hast done. Roses have thorns, and silver fountains have mud. Clouds and eclipses stain both moon and sun, and loathsome canker lives in the sweetest blood. All men make faults, and even I in this, authorizing thy trespass with compare. Myself corrupting, salving thy amiss, excusing thy sins more than thy sins are. For to thy sensual fault I bring in sense, thy adverse party is thy advocate, and gainst myself a lawful plea commence. Such civil war is in my love and hate, that I an accessory needs must be, to that sweet thief which sourly robs from me. Almost! I'm doing lots of grunting at the ends of these sonnets, and I apologise for my pronunciation of THs, because they're Fs where I come from, and they're always going to be Fs. That was Sonnet 35, with a little rant from me at the end. I'm Mark Chatterley, and I'm joined by the lovely, smiley, happy, gay, in the old sense...
I'm Thierry Heles.
And we're going through all the Shakespeare sonnets, and we're up to 35, which puts us, about a fifth of the way through, something like that.
Yeah, fifth of the way.
Yeah.
We are getting there.
Slowly. So we're doing quite well, I think. What do you think about this sonnet, Thierry?
Too many complicated... Well, not complicated words. Reading... It sounded fairly horrible. Well, not the way you read it, but
you're thinking. Dig some more.
Having to read it out loud, I'm sure I'm going to screw up later. Probably even worse than the last one.
The last one was good. I like that. It's fine. No one noticed. I don't think anyone noticed. Don't bring it up, and no one will know.
No. No one will ever know.
It has some nice imagery in it. A silver fountain's mud. I was talking about slightly earlier. Because you brought up roses and thorns, which is such a dull observation. But silver fountain's mud, I love. The idea that you have this resplendent silver fountain that cost millions. And obviously because it's stuck on a load of grass and it's spraying water everywhere, it's covered in mud, which is such a nice, I think, a lovely idea. And clouds and eclipses both stain both moon and sun, and loathsome canker lives in the sweetest bud. Canker, I think, in this sense, I know is an oldie-fashionedy word for cancer, or what we would now call cancer. Is that the case?
Yeah, apparently it's a disease which destroys flowers.
Oh, okay, so it's
which makes sense. Loathsome canker lives in sweetest bud, so it's basically destroying it from the inside.
Yeah, and maybe that's how it became. I know I read a book for my dissertation which had the word canker in it, meaning cancer. Or growth, because they didn't really know the difference between any other growth and cancer. But yeah, cancer.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, the cancer is basically a disease which destroys you from the inside.
Yeah, that does make sense.
We're not flowers. No one is a flower, but still the same sort of concept.
That's quite a poetic thing. No one is a flower. I could see that going into a poem. But that's your first line.
No one is a flower. I'm going to write that later when we finish recording.
But I want to hear it. I want to see it. But yeah, it's still about... We're still talking about faults and resolving someone, I guess, or absolving someone from the crime, I guess, is still being talked about here. All men make faults, and even I in this, authorizing thy trespass would compare. Myself corrupting, salving thy amiss. Odd word.
Yeah.
And excusing thy sins more than thy sins are. That's a very odd line. Excusing thy sins more than thy sins are, as if saying he's being excused of more than he's actually done. Is that how you're reading that?
Well, I read it as that, because before that he says authorizing that trespass was compare myself corrupting. So he's basically... Shakespeare is almost going overboard to come up with reasons why the youth didn't sin.
Yes. Or did, but it wasn't a big deal, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe he did just kiss another boy, and then Shakespeare's turned it into this massive issue, and now he's trying to excuse it as if it were this massive issue.
Yeah. That.
So he's excusing more of the sin than there was actually committed.
And he's trying to build the fair youth back up from this fault-ridden state.
Yeah.
It's now back to where he was before. I quite like... I don't know if it's particularly good to do this, but it is quite nice. These sonnets seem to play into the whole... It actually was a physical relationship aspect. And I don't like forcing gayness onto things. I suppose I should qualify with that, which I am gay. Because otherwise that sounds a bit weird. But
you homophobe.
But sometimes you see people at the very slightest reference going, oh, well, that character's gay and this person's gay. And I don't like doing that. But there seems to be more and more in the sonnets that is suggesting it's more than a admiration. And even if there was no physical relationship, there seems to be it's more than deep friendship, and it's more than love of a best friend. It seems one step beyond that, or at least that's how I'm reading it. Maybe I'm forcing it in unintentionally.
I'm still not convinced whether there actually was a physical relationship, or whether Shakespeare just wanted one.
Yes.
There might have been a physical aspect, as in physical interest in the youth. But up until this point, I don't see that anything has actually happened between the two.
And of course, there's obviously the writer's prerogative that when I write, and I write in the first person, I'm not me. I'm not necessarily me.
Yeah.
So
although people don't really tend to get that with poetry. You can read a play. We read Hamlet, and no one goes, "Oh, Hamlet, that's obviously Shakespeare."
Yes.
That's obviously him. But in a poem, or sonnet in this case, everyone just sort of expects it to be the truth.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
Yeah, actually, that is true. But I suppose, in one sense, poets are more linked with their poems. You always think of Shakespeare's sonnets, and you always think of Wordsworth's and Blake's. It's always the authors. Whereas with plays, unless you're very famous, like Pinter or someone like that, they're not so and so's plays. There's a level of abstraction between the writer and the medium, which poetry doesn't seem to have. So I wonder if that plays into it.
Yeah, but I mean, we do it with well, not that I was saying plays, but we do it with everything. We have Dickensian novels. We have Orwellian fiction. We have.
That's true.
We have J.J. Abrams doing Star Trek and Fringe, and obviously that gets to a point where it's so much science fiction that we all just go, no, it can't be real. But in any sort of art or fiction, there's always a point where you could go, yeah, why do people not see an autobiographical part in that?
And I suppose, yeah, I wonder if it's to do with how grounded they are. Again, I'm going to go back to Victoria Wood as an example, because I love Victoria Wood. The series that I've lent you, which you can't watch because you've not got a DVD player at the moment. If anyone wants to buy Thierry a DVD player, please do get in contact so he can watch Dinner Ladies. But
I'll find it. I'll check iTunes and see if it's on there.
But the characters are very down to earth. They're realistic, northern, down to earth people, and I can't help but when I watch it feel that each character has a part of Victoria Wood in it, not necessarily a real life experience. I don't think it's acting out her real life, but in terms of people she knows and situations she's been in, it seems to be more real. But that, I think, might be, in the same way with poetry, a false impression, because it's down to earth, and when it's down to earth, we tend to try and put ourselves into places. Whereas, like you're saying, with Star Trek, it's so weird to us. We don't tend to put ourselves in the characters' places. I mean, we'd all like to be there, but we don't watch it going, "Oh, I relate to that person."
Well, you can relate on an emotional level,
but not in a direct sense, I guess, is what.
Yeah, you can't go, "Oh, I understand that decision not to invade planet such and such."
Yeah, whereas I understand what love is and unrequited love is. Yeah. I think most people have understanding of that, maybe.
Unless you're a monster.
Yeah, I was going to say unless you're unlucky, but then I thought In fact, people who are more unlucky are probably more likely
People who've never experienced unrequited love are probably the lucky ones.
Yeah.
But then it's an emotion that you need to go through as well, I guess.
Yeah. I think it builds character and makes you distinguish that. As I was having a chat with the other half the other day, this is going to sound really bad, but everyone settles. Everyone settles because no one is ever going to be your perfect partner. Because in your head, and in the same way that these sonnets are addressing it, perfection doesn't exist. So no one is going to be every single thing you want. So everyone in some level settles. Now, I'm not talking about going, I'll
take him, he's good enough.
Yeah, I find you completely ugly, therefore I'm going to... It's not that kind of setting, but in the sense that maybe they're not quite as smart as you wanted them to be, but they're near enough. And maybe they don't dress in the same way you want, but they're near enough. So everyone settles in that sense. So yeah, but I think this has been a long talk, sorry. Yeah, this going back to this is maybe we identify with Shakespeare and we think it is Shakespeare because it's that kind of, we can understand what he's going through.
Yeah,
that was
actually, I guess comedy is another one where we take everything as autobiographical, as in stand-up comedy. When stand-up comedians tell stories from their lives, everyone just accepts them as the truth, where they could be completely made up.
Yes, yeah, definitely, yeah. And I think probably in most cases are made up. Because
I hope that there's some really, really bad stuff out there happening otherwise.
So just a very select few people as well.
Just some, yeah.
And
well, either that or that just the way they cope with it, where there's other people just, I don't know, go to Wetherspoons and get drunk and punch someone in the face.
Yeah. And then comedians aren't the people you see on TV. The people you see on TV are very carefully crafted characters. So, and I'm talking about people like Jack D and Russell Howard and Brand and all these other comedians. God, all the names just flew out of my head then. But each one of them has a role, and that's why the panel shows work so well. Like David Mitchell. David Mitchell has that upper class, not connecting to culture. Yeah. That's probably not what he's like. In fact, I'm fairly sure it's not, because his writing is actually quite culturally relevant. But that's his character.
Yeah, he does make a lot. If you read his Observer column, he does make a lot of references to other stuff that's going on. So, yeah.
So they all have the established characters because it allows everyone to riff off each other, knowing how they're going to respond. And that's not... If you meet David Mitchell, he's not going to be like the David Mitchell you see on Lie to Me or whatever other show he's going to be in.
Which is a shame. Yeah. Well, they had that on Would I Lie to Me with his face, Robert Webb.
Yes.
Who's always playing a bit of the knobhead and the good for nothing sort of person. And then he went on about how he learned juggling just to show off to his kids, and because they like juggling, he actually had a personal trainer that taught him how to do that. And you just go, that's I didn't know you had kids. I'm just not interested in personal life of celebrities. They're just like, that's actually really, really sweet, and it doesn't work at all with that character that he's built up for himself.
Yes, yeah, exactly that. And so I guess if we draw this back to the sonnet, is that I don't know, and I don't think the assumption should be made that these sonnets are autobiographical. They could just be a couple of characters Shakespeare's dreamt up in his head. That's what I'm going for. That was a very long-winded way for me to say I'm not convinced Shakespeare's gay, wasn't it? That was me covering my arse and I was against the walls, boys. Anyway, sorry, I'll let you talk for a bit now.
I'm pretty sure we will never actually know whether he was gay unless someone does come along and changes the laws of physics and manages to build a time machine to go back to the 1600s.
And then we can send in an army of gay men to flirt with Shakespeare.
We'll send him back Gogwan, and if Shakespeare isn't gay yet, he will be gay afterwards.
Are you saying Gok Wang has some sort of superpower to turn people gay?
Well, he would just look up and clean him up, because obviously Gok Wan is all about beauty and a lot of waxing and makeup and all that sort of stuff. And I can't imagine Shakespeare, anyone at the time knowing a lot about that stuff at all.
No, they barely knew about soap.
Yeah. Well, we need soap. Just a bit of perfume.
Exactly that.
Febreze.
The student's cleaning method.
Which, yeah.
I'm just going to Febreze this jumper. I unless you have something else to say about this sonnet, which we've not talked about at all.
No, we've not said a single thing about this other than there's a few nice lines. Well, we still have some Christian imagery in this.
Ooh.
We have authorizing thy trespass, which
Yes.
reminded me of the Lord's Prayer. Obviously, forgive us our trespasses.
Yep.
He talks about sins a lot.
Which
he does go into legal speak as well. Thy advocate and the lawful plea commences, and
but then it goes into civil war. Such civil war is my love and hate, that I an accessory needs must be. So to that sweet thief which sourly robs from me. It's as if suggesting that the fair youth has done something against Shakespeare, or the character we're going to call Shakespeare, and he's trying to forgive it, but there's a civil war on his head between the love he feels for the fair youth and the hate that the fair youth has done something to him, done something bad.
Which is a very relatable feeling. As I said before, a lover can forgive, but it's not. You don't just get over something. Whatever he did, you're not just going, it's fine.
Yeah.
There is a period of forgiveness and working it through, if you want to work it through, which apparently Shakespeare does.
Yeah, there is definitely a sense of, even though he's not sure he can excuse the person because there's that civil war in his head. There is a sense of he excusing my sins more than they are. He wants to get past this and carry on with his doting.
He wants the perfect being back.
Yeah, which again isn't understandable, because I'm sure that's where a lot of religious feelings come from. You want to have a relationship with someone who's perfect when we're all fundamentally flawed. We don't have full control over what we do, in the sense that when you're incredibly horny, you do stuff that you wouldn't do when you're not incredibly horny. And when you're incredibly hungry, you'll eat stuff that you wouldn't eat if you weren't incredibly hungry. There's a base level in humans that we are controlled by our chemical-based natures at times.
I've never really... I mean, I was theoretically Christian. Well, I did believe in a God for a while. But I never really had that needing a relationship with a perfect being.
Okay.
For me, it was more that sort of, I needed to know that something more was out there.
Okay, well, maybe that's that. There's more than one. There probably is more than one core.
No, I'm not saying. I never really had that idea that I needed a relationship with a perfect being.
It's definitely.
I guess I've had that more when I was in love. I guess I can relate more to that sort of instinct, sort of, you're perfect, sort of the initial phase, and then they turn out to be
human,
a vile person, and
human,
or human, as you people call it.
But there's definitely a sense in at least British Christianity. Definitely, I'm not wholly sure about any other religions, just because I don't have as many friends in other religions. I do, but not as many, so I don't have as wide a net to draw from. But there's definitely a sense in British Christianity to have a relationship with God. It's all about your personal relationship with the divine.
It's fair, from what I remember. I haven't gone to church in, I don't know. I mean, I left the church. I'm not officially in a church anymore.
Sinner.
I actually wrote to the Archbishop and said, I don't believe in God. Please cross me off the register. And
did he?
I'm out.
He'd cut your name out, and he's
no. They just cross you out from the register in the church where you were baptized.
Okay.
And you're officially kicked out then.
See, but I suppose
I forgot my point now. No, but they do talk about relationships with God, but I just thought, well, that's. I don't know. Just I saw a relationship more as a sort of connection with him.
Okay. Maybe I'm because I
obviously wasn't a good Christian. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left the church.
but I'm quite happy to be corrected on these things, because when I was a Christian,
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's an aspect of it that I personally never saw.
Yeah. Well, I could easily be wrong, because when I was a Christian, I wasn't a Christian, if that makes sense. I was a Christian because it was what you are if you're white and raised in England or Britain. That's what you are. And then I realised that was stupid, and I kind of started exploring other religions, and I switched, and then I realised that all religions are a bit weird, and then I became kind of agnostic, and then I kind of went, actually, no. And that was my religious journey over the space of quite a number of years.
I just read Christopher Hitchens and went, yeah, this guy does have a point.
When you're reading Christopher Hitchens, there's every couple of pages it just descends into incoherent gibberish where he got drunk and then falls asleep, and then the next day it's nice and clear again. It descends to Sorry, bad Hitchens joke.
He does some fairly constructed arguments. His deconstruction of Mother Teresa is pretty compelling.
Evil woman. If anyone out there still thinks Mother Teresa is a good woman, you need to learn. She was an evil, horrible witch of a woman.
Chapter, was it 4 or 5 in God Is Not Great? It's,
There's suffering brings you closer to God. So all these people who are dying in her hospitals that she set up, no painkillers. She made them suffer. When she was ill, no, she got flown to some specialist private hospital where she was doped up to the nines. And what's worse is she didn't necessarily think that the suffering brought the person who was suffering closer to God. She thought it brought her closer to God. So she was making people suffer so she could have a better relationship with God. She was an evil, vile witch of a woman. Sorry.
Well, didn't they, after she died, they found out that she apparently stopped believing in God when she was like 20 or 21. And then the rest of her life was just basically her trying to get that belief and faith back. It's
disgusting. It's disgusting. And it winds me up. I was on a training course where they went, name people you really look up to. And loads of people in the room went Mother Teresa. And I was just like, no, you look up to the image that she's been given in the media. Which, okay, is actually probably a
very, very carefully constructed image.
Which is probably a very good thing to look up to, actually, if you truly... If you take her away from it and just look up to the media image, wonderful, that's fine. But don't ever for a second think that she was actually like that. She was horrid and evil, and the fact that she's on her fast track into sainthood is disgusting. Anyway, let's end that. Now that suddenly our viewing figures drop because all the religious people are no longer listening, you can read out Sonnet 35.
Sonnet 35. No more be grieved at that which thou hast done. Roses of thorns and silver fountains mud. Clouds and eclipses stain both moon and sun, and loathsome canker lives in sweetest bud. All men make faults, and even I in this, authorizing thy trespass with compare, myself corrupting, salving thy amiss, excusing thy sins more than thy sins are. For to thy sensual faults I bring incense, thy adverse party is thy advocate, and gainst myself a lawful plea commence. Such civil war is in my love and hate, that I an accessory needs must be to that sweet thief which sourly robs from me.
Those last 3 words got me on my read through. That was Sonnet 35. Thank you for listening to Shakespeare Sonnets. I've been Mark Chatterley, and you can follow me on Twitter with @Nufkin.
And I've been Thierry Heles, and you can follow me on Twitter @SoundOfSeagulls.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Thierry. We shall see everyone else again next time.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to Shakespeare Sonnets with Mark Chatterley and Thierry Heles. This has been an In-Ear Entertainment podcast. To listen to other podcasts or find out more about In-Ear Entertainment, go to www.inearentertainment.com.